Do you remember life before modern messaging apps? Well, since their rise alongside the smartphones, they've quickly become a primary way we communicate with friends and family. And they are big business. The world's top 2 messaging apps alone have over a quarter of the people on the planet using them. WhatsApp has 1.5 billion users worldwide, while Facebook Messenger follows closely with 1.3 billion. Both, of course, owned by Facebook, who doesn't disclose their financial statements, but Forbes estimates WhatsApp's total revenue to be $5 billion and the average revenue per user to be $4 by 2020. And let's not forget others like China's WeChat, Korea's Viber, and Japan's Line that are used by hundreds of millions or even billions of people on a daily basis. But more and more users are asking, just how secure are they? Well, I'm joined in the studio today by Derek Roga. He is CEO of Equis. Thank you so much for joining us on Tech Talk today.
Thank you.
Now, at your company, Equis, you're basically in the business of using encryption to make communication platforms like messaging apps more secure.
We use encryption as technology to ensure the security of the communications.
So this is something that, I mean, for somebody like myself who uses several communication platforms a day, every hour, I would say, how concerned should I be about the security?
Well, look, security is something that now is really prevalent in people's minds, right? It's about security, which is ensuring the integrity of the communications. It's around privacy, which is getting a lot of airtime lately as well. So I think a combination of security and privacy should really embody the ethos of any kind of secure comms app. So look at WhatsApp, for instance. They say it's encrypted. There are other apps like Viber and possibly Line that are also encrypted. So they all use open source encryption technologies to ensure that the communication between peers or a group are encrypted, and we do exactly the same thing as well.
Okay, so is there a major security issue or not? Or is this just...
Security from the other side, security from governments having access to information. So when you and I communicate as just as friends or colleagues, there's nothing nefarious about that communication.
Usually.
Not usually, hopefully. But when people have malicious intent,
right,
then the security issue raises up in regards to can law enforcement and other organizations have access to that? And that's where there's a challenge. How do you balance that out between people's personal security and privacy,
right,
and then the need for law enforcement to be able to actually have access to that?
A little bit a la Snowden, right?
Absolutely.
This whole situation comes to mind. But like in light of Facebook's potential, $3 to $5 billion fine by the FTC for privacy violations, Zuckerberg says that it's really an internet problem. It's not specifically a Facebook problem. What do you think? Do you disagree?
I disagree. I think the way in which the entire social media business has evolved, it's evolved based on the back of people's data. And I think I draw a line between illegal activity, which certainly Facebook hasn't done, versus unethical activity. And that's where the question marks arise. Because I may not be doing something illegal, but is what I'm doing in sharing people's information, in selling that information. Right. Is that unethical? And who owns that data, right? Because the reality is that, in our point of view, at Equis and our own social media platform, Flame, we believe that data privacy is what we've got to focus on. I joke and say it's data privacy versus data piracy, right? And our belief is that each person should be the owner of their own data. It's an asset. It's your own asset. So why should I give that asset to a third party to manage or to be able to curate in ways that are unacceptable to me as the owner of that data.
Such an interesting conversation. I also had this recently with an AI expert in Ticino about how he suggests we create a market, a healthcare data market, where
Right.
people are owners, in fact, of their own data. But anyway, we digress.
Yes.
Back to,
and by the way,
yeah.
and that in fact is one of the cornerstones of our entire business model, is actually the ownership of that data.
Okay, all right. I want to get back to that in just a second. But just to clarify, we made a reference to Facebook. Of course, Facebook owns WhatsApp, and Facebook. So that you've got your social media platforms, and then you have your messaging
Correct,
apps.
yes.
But, you know, I mean, if one owns the other...
They're one and the
kinds
same
of...
for the most part in today's world anyway, because messaging is really one of the cornerstones of communications within all social media platforms. Whether you're communicating via photographs on Instagram, whether you're communicating by sharing your music with someone, you're still communicating.
Okay, so yes, one, you know, when you're talking about one, then you see the other.
Right.
Now we're seeing people question the security of platforms like Facebook, et cetera, and, you know, our day-to-day communications platforms. But then you've got Snapchat on the other side that this past week had really great, strong numbers.
4 million new subscribers. Yeah.
Yes, their users are increasing. So what are they doing differently?
Well, I think Snapchat went through a bit of a transition, right? Because initially when they first came out with their IPO, I think 2 years ago, 2017, they were valued at $27 billion at their IPO price. But over the following 12 months, their market cap dropped to, I think, under 10 million, because they appeared to have lost the connection with the very same subscribers that had got them to where they were. And now they've reinvented themselves somewhat. They've added new features. They've added more sizzle to the platform to engage those millennials and the Gen Zs.
Are they more secure? I mean, are they more secure than your WhatsApps or your?
No, I don't think it's more secure. I think it's more of a matter of what appeals to the demographic that they're chasing versus the security aspect. I would say from a security aspect, which is the insurance of the integrity of the communications that you and I have, that no one can hack that or no one can breach that conversation. Most of the messaging apps or social media platforms use open source encryption technologies. So there's parity in terms of what's being used. And the reason why they use open source technology is because it's proven and tested.
And you are, as you said earlier, for your messaging app, Flame,
right,
are using the same.
Absolutely.
So what are you doing differently?
Well, what we do very differently is the way in which we actually monetize our ecosystem.
Okay, tell me about this.
And our belief, it kind of goes back to our earlier conversation, is that our belief is that the data that's being generated, your own digital footprint, should be owned by you. And you should have the right in determining how much or how little you want to make available in the public domain to monetize.
Okay.
And our whole ethos is basically the more you share and the more you engage within our ecosystem, the more rewarding it is. So the reward comes from the ability of being able to monetize the data. So, for example, we know.
So give me an example. How does that work?
So I'll give you an example. A good example, maybe. Today we know that Facebook and others. I think we all pick on Facebook because they're the biggest out there, right? But there are others. There's Amazon. There's Netflix. They all take your data and they essentially target you based upon the information that they've learned about you.
Right.
Right. And they target you. You then, in the hopes that you actually do something commercially, an e-commerce transaction,
right,
to purchase something, right, and they get a piece of the action. So our viewpoint is that they've taken your data, it's now stored in their central servers, whereas what we do is we say, okay, your data comes in, you collect your data, we give you your personal data vault, kind of like your safety deposit box, if you will,
Okay.
for your own data. And then when you want to use your data to monetize it, for let's say if you like the color red, and you like sports cars, for example, and you want to make that information available to a sports car manufacturer, so there may be 50 sports car manufacturers, but only 8 of them manufacture red sports cars. But now they can target you directly because that's exactly what you've made available, but no other information was necessary for you to make available about where you live, where you travel.
So you can pick and choose what information you make available, and you get a cut of this.
And you, as the subscriber.
No, but I mean Equis, the company.
Certainly,
this
absolutely.
is how you make your
money.
money.
Absolutely, absolutely. So our model is that all the revenue that we generate, we share with our subscribers.
Okay.
So there's a sharing value system that we're have embodied into our ecosystem, but it's all based upon the fact that it's your data, it's your privacy, and you have the ability to decide whether you share a little, a lot, or even none.
And how are you funding the company?
We've been financed. Initially, when we first started the company, we financed the company ourselves.
Okay.
And then we raised capital through private equity.
$3.5 million, more or less. Is this what we're talking about?
Actually, we raised 15 million francs that helped us build our platform and technology. And we're now in the process of doing what they call a Series B fundraising.
Okay.
We're raising 20 million francs now. And this is really to help us enhance the technology and to build our market share and execution of our marketing strategy.
Speaking of which, I know you've already got your hands in some international pots, like
Sure.
Sri Lanka, but also you've got Mexico and Nigeria, which for a Swiss-based company just feels a little random.
Right.
Where are you going with that?
So what our thinking was, and a lot of us have been in the telecom space for many years, so we understand some of the pain that the industry is going through, where telecom operators, due to competition, and actually not just competition amongst the industry, but competing with the likes of the Facebooks of the world and the WhatsApps and the Vibers, et cetera, their revenues are starting to shrink dramatically per user. Why? Because their core services that they would charge you for to make that phone call or send that text message now is free. When you're using WhatsApp or you're using...
Right, which actually brings me to the point. How are you going to make money? How are you going to charge? Do you charge for Flame?
No.
For your messaging
No,
app?
we don't. Because we don't have to.
Okay, so it's a bit like WhatsApp in the sense that it's included.
Absolutely.
The cost is already included in your mobile bills.
The difference in the way we approach the market is that we actually work with the mobile operators. So we say to the mobile operators, look, these over-the-top apps, like the messengers and like the WhatsApps, et cetera, have basically eaten your lunch, right? Wouldn't you like to be able to get a piece of that revenue that they've been taking away from you? So we're giving them a level playing field, maybe even now a bit tilted in their favor, to where they can engage directly with their subscribers.
Okay.
Create value in that relationship. Maybe even reward their subscribers. How about them paying the subscriber in data, free data, to use an app that's going to reward the entire ecosystem? And that's the conversation that we've had with CEOs, with mobile operators, particularly in the emerging economies, because the growth opportunity there for social media, the evolution of smartphones becoming more affordable in those markets, it's a huge opportunity for us. So we're bringing the mobile operators, we're bringing the subscribers on the journey with us by changing their narrative on how we treat people and how we build privacy into our ecosystem and yet monetize it.
Okay, so this works for the emerging markets, but what about Switzerland? What's happening here?
Certainly. So this here is our corporate headquarters. There were some very specific reasons why we decided to base our business here in Switzerland.
Tax reasons?
Okay. And actually, tax was not one of the driving factors behind it.
Okay.
The factor was that in the world of the Snowdens and the PRISM projects, people became very suspicious of American-led or other European-led services.
So Switzerland still has that.
So Switzerland still has
reputation.
a reputation for privacy, secrecy, quality
In spite of, right?
Quality of service,
Right.
Neutrality. So from a business perspective, it's certainly made a lot of sense for us.
Okay.
The other aspect of it is that actually in Switzerland, the way in which the system is set up is very proactive to allow companies to establish themselves over here, to be able to leverage access to the common market, but not be in the common market, if you will. Good human resources, a good social structure, and the ease of doing business here is remarkable. So it really worked to our advantage to set up shop here in Zurich.
And what do you think about privacy in terms of WeChat, China's WeChat?
There's a reason why other apps haven't been successful in the marketplace there. In fact, if you were to travel to China today and you had a Gmail platform, for example, you couldn't access your email. It's blocked in China. WeChat is a fantastic company. They're not just your average messaging app. They've built e-commerce into it. They've built payment systems into it. I've had people that have traveled to China and they've never used cash for a transaction for their entire 2-week vacation there. They've used WeChat Pay. So they've built a remarkable ecosystem, but it's predominantly in China. And there are very strict censorship laws and regulations in China, particularly for accounts that are set up in China. So I would say the security and the privacy elements that we've been talking about over the past few minutes don't really exist in China. You can be fairly certain that you're being listened to, or that there's a monitoring mechanism built into their ecosystem, because the way in which, if you're just familiar, very recently there was a controversy about the Australian Prime Minister, who actually set up a WeChat account using a WeChat account that was based in China, and they were kicked off the WeChat network because they were not allowed to, as a foreigner, use that platform in China, because there are very specific rules and regulations that they assign to Chinese-based accounts. So I think WeChat, from a business perspective, has done a fantastic job and continues to do so. But in terms of what the regulations are in China around censorship and their ability to monitor communications, you can probably suspect that that's pretty vigilant in China.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us here today in our studios in Zurich, Derek. It was a pleasure having you on Tech Talk.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.